We've got a lot to get to tonight on the show, so let me first introduce our distinguished panel as we all still try to come to grips with what happened on Saturday night. First up, Angie Machado, publisher of Beaver Blitz. Hey, Angie. And former Beaver, pinch hitting for Tim Euhus tonight, Oregon State's own Slade Norris. Slade, welcome to the set of Talkin Beavers.
Good to be back again. It's always good to be here with you.
Well, I will start with you. And, Angie, you have more time to think about it. I've had plenty of time to think and still don't have an answer. But from the opening kickoff onward, it was a disaster. Full scale Saturday night for the Beavers against Washington. As you observed it, what happened?
You know, I thought about it all weekend after watching the game, and it was really, I think, a lack of real drive in the game. They could have been distracted a bit from having to be senior night and kind of get out of the usual routine for the game. But in watching the game, I saw guys kind of waiting for somebody else to make a play, and that hasn't really dictated who the Beavers are this year so far. So really coming into this next week, I want to see guys go attack, especially like the linebackers, for example. Go attack the line of scrimmage, go cause havoc, and not kind of sit back and wait and see what happens and kind of expect somebody else to step up.
There was a real sense, and I've used the word often in the last couple of days, mulling it over, it was inexplicable. There really is no explanation and nothing really to sort of hang your hat on. The three-game losing streak going in had some semblance of Stanford. You went down to the final play. USC was USC, but you fought hard in that game, and it got away a little bit late. And against Arizona State, Angie, they had a chance down the stretch of that game. But Saturday night against Washington, any hope seemed to disappear again right after the opening kickoff.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, with Arizona State, I mean, I'm not surprised that the offense is struggling right now. They're so one-dimensional. That didn't shock me. It's the defense that shocked me, and this lack of fire and intensity and heart. I mean, they just kind of, like Slade said, they were just kind of sitting back, and you just didn't see any kind of I mean, this is the Huskies. I mean, if you can't get up for the Huskies, you know, what are you going to do?
Well, when you look at the rushing numbers that Washington put up, and to rush for 530 is just, again, a number almost impossible to get your mind around. Three guys rushed for over 100 yards. And Slade, you've been in games where teams can get momentum, and there isn't a whole lot you can do about it. So from your standpoint, what can the Beavers do defensively against another high-powered attack this week to try to begin to slow things down?
As I referenced earlier with the linebackers and D-line, go attack. Don't sit back and kind of watch as things happen and let them, sort themselves out. Go cause problems. With the Oregon offense, you have to get into their backfield and kind of mess them up and make them cause themselves some problems because you're back there in the backfield. Another thing is leadership. With games like that, when you're losing and the other team has momentum, it really takes leaders to sit down and kind of regroup the team and say, look, this is where we are right now. We can get out of this. We need to come together and play. I didn't see that last week. It's kind of disappointing because I've seen it earlier this year. So next week, I just really want to see us just go get them. You know, it's the Civil War. You can throw all the rankings out, throw all the previous records out. Anything can happen in that game, so go have fun, play the last game, and see what happens.
And Slade was involved, as you well recall, some really high-stakes Civil Wars in 06, 07, and 08. Angie, I got to ask you just your sense of, you said they haven't been able to run the football. That's been clear. Is there something just from a bounce-back standpoint, even beyond the X's and O's, I mean, that you would jump on what Slade had to say?
Just having fun.
Yeah.
They did not look like they were having fun. They looked like they wanted to be anywhere but Reser Stadium on Saturday night. So, get back to the having fun. And, I think Sean needs to start having fun again. He has so much pressure on him right now because I think he's feeling the whole game is on his shoulders. He needs to just settle down, have some fun, go back to why you're playing football. It's a game.
And a running game would help, but Sean Mannion has played as the quarterback position in stretches this year as well as anyone has in the history of the program. And his connection with Brandon Cooks has been absolutely phenomenal. So one way to try to help get the Beavers going again, and whether or not they'll be able to get the ball to Brandon Cooks late as much as they'd like, we see that this connection, this combination is the best in the history of the program. But it has hit some hard times a little bit of late. Can they get that back for this big game on Friday?
I think they definitely can. They try to use Brandon in all ways, with the fly sweep, with the screens. I mean, any way they can because he's such an asset. But they really need the running game to get going. They need another wide receiver to step up. Because looking at the last game, I felt bad for Sean because he has so much on his shoulders here and he's trying so hard to succeed, but nobody else was getting open. So we need maybe the tight ends to really come through and be utilized next game because we have a lot of talent there. And if we can get that, maybe all of a sudden we can get the focus completely off Brandon to where he can find some open spots again and be the player that he is.
And Brandon did catch yet another touchdown from Sean Mannion in the fourth quarter where the Beavers finally broke through and scored 27 points. And with regard to the run game, I don't know how much stock you can put in to Chris Brown coming in and rushing for 73 yards on 7 carries. He did fumble and get stripped, and you almost said, well, maybe there's a reason why he's not getting more reps. But he bounced back from that. Is there a chance that he could help energize this run game?
You know, I've asked Coach Riley that on our Sunday night conference calls, and Coach Riley said he doesn't really want 3 running backs in the mix right now. He's happy with Teron and Storm. So I think there's some energy there. You also have to remember, though, he was going against the 2s and 3s for Washington. But right. I do like the way he runs. He hits that side fast. He's a little shifty, a little elusive. You know, the Beavers need a spark at however they're going to get it.
Well, that was our shot at trying to explain what happened. I'm not sure you're satisfied with that. I don't think any of us fully understand. It was a game that defied explanation. But the Beavers have moved on to getting ready for the 117th Civil War Friday afternoon in Eugene, and we're excited the rest of the show to be talking about not only the upcoming game, the great history in the game, and 2 guys who could help the Beavers break through in Eugene, Storm Woods and Brandon Cooks, coming up next on Run Catch as we continue from Flat Tail Brewing and Talkin Beavers. If we talk about inexplicable games and results, it sits and hits most with the young men. And the one thing that the Beavers do indeed have this year, and the following 2 guys that we're going to hear in another installment of Run and Catch, 2 great leaders, 2 great young men, and that doesn't change regardless of whatever the last score might have been or what the score may be on Friday or beyond. These are young men that are cornerstones of Oregon State's program, and it's been a real pleasure to listen to them share their thoughts all season long on a variety of subjects. Now, tonight on Run Catch with Storm Woods and Brandon Cooks, we hear about their professional aspirations, football and beyond.
What's your professional aspirations?
I mean, they always say it's life after football, but being honest, I know that's true, but it's always been my dream since I was a little kid to play in the NFL for many reasons. One is, you know, coming up didn't have the things I wanted, and mom had to struggle, family struggled, and I want to be able to repay her, which I never can, but in some aspects, me going to that next level will be able to pave the way for her to never have to work again for the rest of her life, and all my little ones, sisters and stuff like that. Just bring them up and they wouldn't have to worry about nothing. What about yours?
Obviously, I want to make it. I want to make it to the NFL and be able to play at that next level. First of all, I want to finish my degree just because I'll be the first one in my family to get a degree from a university or a degree from a college, period. And so I want to set that bar high for my children and my nieces and nephews to let them know that it's possible to get a college degree no matter, you know, where you come from, your background. You know, so that's my professional aspiration, and maybe one day come take Coach Riley's job, and you know, and tell him he can sit down now and let me take the throne or something like that.
So Brandon Cooks wants to be a coach someday. In a very real sense, he already is. And after his long, productive, prosperous career in the NFL, who knows, he could end up back on an Oregon State sideline. And Angie, Brent Brennan has told us, the position coach, the receivers coach for the Beavers, that he's never had anybody attack how to become a better football player, student athlete, receiver than Brandon Cooks. Just an off-the-chart work ethic. He'll be a great coach someday.
He will. And, you know, it's already kind of started. You watch these guys, and I would actually say, in my opinion, I mean, I think Brandon's great, but James Rogers set the bar so high for that work ethic and staying after and really working. But like Brandon told us earlier in the season, he talks to Marcus Wheaton and James Rogers every week, and they're still coaching him, and they take those younger guys under their wings. And, you know, Brandon's already mentoring Victor Bolden and those guys. It's really fun to see. And like you said earlier, you know, I don't know what the future holds for Brandon, whether he'll be back next year or not, but just a class act and somebody that's been so fun to follow his career.
Absolutely. And Slade, in terms of talking about both of these guys and what I said going into the feature about, you know, the year has been frustrating and everyone feels it. You played the game and you know what it's like to come out and deal with these tough losses. The fan base, everybody in Beaver Nation sort of, I think, addled by what's gone on and trying to come to grips with what it all means. But these guys like Storm and Brandon, and when you play, you own it. I mean, it's not easy to live with.
It's definitely not. An example of that is back my freshman year, Alexis Cerna in the LSU game. Missed the extra points, missed the field goals. Well, that next Monday, I had class with him, and school had just started, so they were taking roll. And as soon as that name was called out, I felt like the entire class just turned. Everybody's glaring at him. And yet, I mean, he's still a great person, still a great individual, and he's working his hardest out there. He comes back into being one of the greatest kickers that we've had at Oregon State. But yeah, we got to always remember that these guys are out there, and they are working hard, and they are doing their best. And yeah, you know what? Everybody makes mistakes sometimes, but they'll come out and they'll do it right this next week.
The great effort and leadership shown by guys like Storm and Brandon, excellent, will serve the team well in preparation for the 117th Civil War coming up this week at Autzen Stadium. Speaking of Alexis, as Slade did, his name will come up more on this show and some memorable moments in the Civil War. A lot more to get to. Thanks for joining us. Talkin Beavers from Flat Tail Brewing, presented by Wilson Motors. It's time for this week's Standard TV and Appliance Rewind, where we look back to one of the memorable games in Civil War history, and in fact the last win for the Beavers head-to-head in the Civil War, the 2007 game. And we begin early in the fourth quarter from Autzen Stadium, where Lyle Moivow rushes on a quarterback sneak for a yard to tie the game at 28. Moivow, one of 4 runners to score rushing touchdowns in this football game. Alexis Cerna had a field goal blocked with 1 minute 9 seconds remaining when the Beavers had a chance to go ahead and win the game perhaps in regulation. And then some confusion down the stretch at the end of regulation when Oregon's Matt Evenson missed a field goal with 53 seconds left. That results in the game going to overtime. Alexis Cerna makes a 41-yard field goal to send it to a second overtime. What was going on in your heart on that play?
You know, at that point, I just remember sitting there on the sidelines, you know, holding the hands with the guys. You got butterflies in your stomach, and you just, it can't end like this. We've got to get this. We've earned this. We've worked hard enough for this game. Our fans deserve this game. And, you know, he punched it in, and we took advantage of that. So it all started with him there.
Cerna making just a clutch kick, 41-yarder to send it to the second overtime. And I think Angie, Slade, and everyone in Beaver Nation remembers what happens on the fly sweep that the Oregon defenders were calling. Fly sweep, fly sweep. Everybody knew what was coming. Moivow could have yelled, yeah, you're right. Now try to block it. James gets to the edge, turns the corner, scores the touchdown. Then there was a defensive goal line stand to hold Jonathan Stewart out. Beavers win 38-31. What do you remember most about that night?
James's run. I mean, that run was classic James Rogers. And, I mean, gosh, it was so... It reminded me back to even Ken Simonson's runs or Steven Jackson's runs. I mean, that is a classic all-time at Autzen. Remember, like Slade talked about earlier, this was the home team was winning year after year after year, home team, and this was at Autzen. A big, big win.
And Slade, that goal line stand that I referred to, I mean, you still have to hold on now. You're up 38-31. What do you remember about that last sequence and the final stop on Jonathan Stewart?
You know, it kind of reminded me of the Cal game over again that year, too.
Earlier,
We'd done it previously in the season. We're going against another great running back that they had there with Jonathan Stewart. And it's guys out there playing their part and making plays. You referenced the offense earlier. We had 4 different guys of rushing touchdowns. It was just that whole game took a team effort, and that's what it really takes in a Civil War when emotions are running high. You know, things happen, field goals get blocked, but if you just do what you're told, do what you're coached, become a part of something magical, it's fun.
And a guy that insinuated himself into the drama early with Evanson Bernard injured was Matt Severson. He scores a touchdown like in the game's second play, and the Beavs go up 7-0. Severson rushes for over 100 yards. Wouldn't it be nice to be talking next week about a 100-yard rusher?
Such fun. Yeah, whether it's, you know, Tehran, Storm.
We'll see. So that was a great moment. But it is the 117th Civil War, and it's upon us. And both teams, quite frankly, and everyone in both fan bases understand this, not exactly going into the game with a groundswell of momentum. We get that. We can see that Oregon has lost 2 of its last 3 games going in. And Slade, I'm just wondering what your sense is about Oregon. Marcus Mariota, how healthy is he? He's been playing with his left knee in a brace. I thought he looked pretty good against Arizona, coming back from the injury that certainly limited him at Stanford. But what's your sense about how this offense is meshing right now, and even the possibility of Byron Marshall being out with an injury as well?
I've noticed in these last couple of games, he did look a little better, Mariota, this last week, but they don't want to run him. If he doesn't have to, the ideal thing would be for him not to run at all. I think the bigger thing this week is the possibility of Byron Marshall being out. So far this year, our defense hasn't handled a big bruising running back very well, and I think we will do a lot better with speed, with the Anthony Thomas and Little Tyner in there. So I think that really plays to our advantage with that injury. So hopefully we don't see him in there, and that'll give our defense a little edge.
Angie, speaking of the defense, I mean, this is a proud unit. You said earlier that your biggest source of astonishment, and there was a lot of it to go around for all of us Saturday, was the inability to slow the run. And it's not as though Oregon is the team you want to play if you're struggling to stop the run. But as we look at the leading tacklers for the Beavers on the year, there's a lot of good football players here in the mix. Are you expecting a bounce-back performance?
I am expecting a bounce-back performance by the defense this year or this week. They know what it takes. They know what they need to do. And this, honestly, this year, I think they've played those mobile quarterbacks better than they have in past years. I mean, Arizona State was a prime example. And Slade's right. They do not want to run Mariota if they don't have to. And it's been very obvious. And that actually plays very well into Beaver's hands because that takes him out of the mix as a runner.
I got to jump in and say real fast, I think the best thing for our team right now is the Civil War, because right now we played with a lack of emotion, with a lack of drive last game. That's just what happened. And I think the easiest way to get emotion and drive back into a game is go ahead and play your rival. So I think it's a perfect time for us.
Well, Slade, you've been on the field in Civil War games. We have not had that august experience. You have. Is there something different? I realize that both teams go into it a little bit wounded, down. Season hasn't gone the way that either program would have hoped, particularly here down the stretch. But does Civil War football itself, regardless of all that, could you feel extra energy in a game?
Oh, definitely. In the game, and I think the biggest part is just the week building up to the game, because this whole community, I mean, Corvallis, Eugene, it's an enormous rivalry. I mean, throughout the nation, I think it's really undervalued on how crazy it really is around here. And so just the support you get all week long, I mean, with students coming up to you saying, hey, man, great job last week, let's go, let's get them this week. It's important. You just feel that all week long, and to where you get to the game and it's just an explosion of this anxiety, emotion, just raw energy you want to go unleash. There's nothing else like it.
Slade, just a quick question, because you're from the Northwest. You understand with the fans and the Oregon fans versus the Oregon State fans, and there's that rivalry there. So many players though from California, Texas, Oklahoma. Do they get that rivalry, do you think? Or, being around here long enough?
They do, because we talk about it, like they feel it with the students and everything, with the people who live in this area. They know how important this is, so I definitely think they do.
We've got a lot more Civil War talk coming up, but heading to break here from Flat Tail Brewing, presented by Wilson Motors. It's Talkin Beavers. Happier times in terms of the Beavers. We looked at the last win, but there was a stretch of time when the Beavers had a pretty good run in the Civil War. In fact, as we go to break, the trivia question for this week in our Civil War edition of Talkin Beavers: what is Oregon State's longest winning streak in the Great Civil War? We'll have the answer next and more coming up. Talkin Beavers from Flat Tail Brewing. Going into break, we asked the trivia question about the Beavers' longest winning streak in the Civil War. We hope not only that you had the number, as you can see, 8, but the years. If you got that, bonus points for you. 1964 through 1971, and some great games in that sequence. Bookended by the 64 win, 7-6, which sent the Beavers ultimately to the Rose Bowl, the last appearance for Oregon State in the Granddaddy. And then what many fans talk about, the best game, or right on par with the 98 game in terms of thrills, The Beavers and the Great Pumpkin and DeAndros winning in Eugene 30-29 in a true classic football game. So 8 in a row. The Beavers hope that they can begin another streak along those lines in the 117th edition of the Civil War coming up Friday at Autzen Stadium. We've talked a little bit on the show so far about what happened on Saturday, still trying to come to grips with it. We've looked a little bit ahead to the Civil War, and coming up, we're going to be getting into some of the other keys to the game, what it's going to take for the Beavers to win. But Slade, let's flip it around a little bit now and talk about Oregon State on offense and what Oregon has done from what you've seen. You've watched them all year long. Very fast, physical, athletic defense, banged up a little bit. What can the Beavers do against that Oregon group to try to get out of the funk that they've been in offensively?
Honestly, I think we have to run the ball, and I think that we can. I mean, look at the last couple of games. Oregon has given up a lot of running yards, and Oregon's defense is built to it's pass defense. They're going to build up a huge lead on offense, and they're just going to sit back there and play pass defense for the rest of the game. Well, if you can get a lead on them and all of a sudden put them in a stress position, that run defense has not been able to hold up these past couple of games. So I really think finally this is the game that we can run on these guys.
That's bold, though.
Do you concur, Angie? I mean, again, to try to get any phase of your game going against Oregon, and with due respect to the fact that they have lost 2 of 3 going in, they're good, and there's a lot of good athletes, and they're playing their last home game. So they'll come out of whatever funk they're in terms of psyche and motivation. Can the Beavers get their run game going a little bit against this group?
They need to. I mean, or it could be a long night because it's putting too much pressure on Sean, Brandon. I think they can. It's just a matter of, calling the plays. I thought against USC they were actually doing an okay job running the ball, but then you only call 13 run plays. That's not going to get it done.
It'll be interesting to see whether they can get that going. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that this isn't the game. This just isn't the year to get the run game going. Where can they find some balance against Slade? You touched on it earlier. Other guys have to take a little pressure off Cooks. How can that happen? What can they do to try to minimize a little bit some of that great athleticism that Oregon has on defense?
I really think we underutilized our tight ends last game. We didn't really target them much or call any plays that are really going to focus on them. So I think this week, Connor Hamlet needs to come out and have a huge game. I think if we can get some of those short passing downs, because we need to put Oregon so we're not sitting there at 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9, 3rd and long. We need to get those short downs, and that's where the tight ends can really come into play. So I think if we can do that and get some manageable 3rd down kind of things, we can have some success against them.
And I like the idea of some screen passes to Storm. I mean, I love Storm out of the backfield. Good receiver, and that can also push Oregon back.
The one thing that was disappointing, just to revisit for a moment, though it pains to do so, against Washington, I give them a great deal of credit. They had the receivers were covered and Storm out of the backfield on would-be screens or wheel routes. I mean, there just weren't many openings against that group. You talked about it last week, how they used their knowledge well.
Yes, and I know Tim didn't agree with me last week, but Keith Hayward played for the Beavers. He played for Coach Riley. He's coached Oregon State. He knows Riley's philosophy. He knows what Oregon State's trying to get done, and I think that really did help them, just knowing what to look for and tendencies.
And Nick Alioti's a very resourceful and experienced and great defensive coordinator, but the Beavers have, even last year at home, they moved the ball, scored 24 points, were close to making that an interesting game. Some turnovers took them out of it late. So the Beavers do have a track record, Slade, of some success, even against that athletic Oregon defense, of scoring points. So I'm expecting them to have that opportunity. Even in your game in 08, the offense scored a lot of points that day.
Yeah, that game was our fault. The biggest thing the offense has to do this game is, like Arizona did, like Stanford did, keep Oregon's offense off the field, sustain some long drives. At the beginning of last game, I think we had 2 3-and-outs right in the beginning, and then, you can't do that against this kind of Oregon team because, yes, their offense has struggled a bit these last couple of games, but they're going to put points on the board. You have to keep them off the field and keep your defense fresh.
But, I do think the mental psyche of both teams comes into play. And who's going to show up? I think Oregon, obviously, since they're not in the national title hunt talk anymore, they've really, some of them, it's really taken a toll on them.
Or the Rose Bowl.
Or
hunt.
the Rose. Well, they didn't even want to go.
No,
supposedly.
well, you know, and as referring again to Nick Aliotti, he said anybody in our team that doesn't appreciate and understand the magnitude of the Rose Bowl, according to Nick, quote, needs to have their heads examined. Well, I think that examination, even though the Rose Bowl's out, I think the whole message will be delivered by both coaches to both teams. This is the 117th Civil War, and I think both teams will be strongly focused come kickoff. We've already kind of hit on all these things. Let's put some real substance to it. Get that football in here for our Wilson Motors game ball predictions. We'll go with Slade Norris, the pride of Jesuit, and a guy who's competed to get us started in the Civil War. And who would you predict, if the Beavers can win this game, what unit or group or person should get that game ball?
I hate to be repetitive, but I got to go with Connor Ham, like I said earlier. I really think that they can give us an edge that we haven't had the past couple weeks. Even this past year, we've had a bunch of injuries and not a lot of success in that area because of those. So if they come out this week and get us in those third and short situations, get us some key first downs, I think that'll really help us along in this game.
As at times maligned and unproductive and frustrating of a season I know it's been for the offensive line group, I think this is a chance for Isaac Seumalo this weekend. Oregon's two nose guards have both been hurt lately, Kelakipi and Heimuli. I'm not sure what their status is for Friday's game, but I think Isaac has a chance to get a push, and so do those veteran guys who I think, Angie, have felt somewhat wounded. They've had their pride challenged all year long. I think they have a shot to. So I'm going to go with Isaac Seumalo, my prediction for the Wilson Motors game ball in the Civil War.
That's a good one. And I'm going to channel my inner Derek Doggett here. I'm going with, I couldn't pick either one, so I'm going to go with the two outside linebackers, Jabril Johnson or DJ Alexander.
Okay.
I mean, we saw no turnovers in this game last week. I think one of those two will have a nice interception, and really, I think they'll really show up and battle hard.
That's a great pick. We need their speed and a lot of one-on-one tackling against Oregon.
Yeah.
Derek Doggett, this may be a future Civil War trivia question, but who's the only linebacker in the history of the series to get pick sixes in consecutive years? You remember Derek Doggett. He was amazing, wasn't he?
It's hard to forget. His speed and athleticism that he brought, I mean, we didn't have anybody else like him. We were lucky to have a guy like that with all the mobile quarterback that Oregon had.
Derek Doggett, back-to-back pick sixes, 06, 07. So thank you, Angie, for invoking the name. It brings a smile to Beaver Nation's face to think about Derek Doggett. We've got a lot more to come. Angie will have a recruiting update. There's a lot more to get to. We appreciate you joining us from Flat Tail Brewing as Talkin Beavers rolls on, presented by Wilson Motors. It's time now for our Taco Bell Top 5, and this was a fun segment. We all had a chance to kind of work on and contribute knowledge and experience and some of the fruits of research. The top 5 wins by the Beavers in Eugene, and this is the most eclectic list we've ever had in that we're spanning decades. We begin number 5, 1971. We've already talked about that thrilling win for the Great Pumpkins team, 30-29. We've broken down the 2007 double overtime win that the Beavers accomplished at Autzen Stadium in 91. The thing I love about this one, and Angie, you may remember, Jerry Pettibone, bless his heart, had his seniors practice carrying him off the field during that game. And then in 57, Tommy Prothro had a chance to win the Civil War with nothing riding on it for the Beavers. There was a no-repeat rule back then, if you can believe it. Couldn't go to the Rose Bowl 2 years in a row. I guess you could never get tired of it that way. But with a no-repeat rule, Tommy Prothro went down and beat Oregon in Eugene 10-7. Joe Francis, a great game. Tommy Prothro carried off the field by his teammates wearing a Hawaiian lei in honor of Joe Francis. That's a great win. Beavers didn't go bowling. Oregon kind of backed into the Rose Bowl that year. In 1942, number 1 on the Taco Bell top 5 list. And for me, as we're going to find out what each of Angie and Slade's personal favorites are. Mine is the number 1 Taco Bell top 5 game, and that's 42. The Beavers winning the Civil War in Eugene. And the reason that's become, I think, far more important to me is just simply reading about the incredible history of the transplanted Rose Bowl. Slade, you know it's the only Rose Bowl game played outside of Pasadena, and the Beavers were in it and won it January 1st of 42. in Durham, North Carolina, over Tommy Prothro and Duke. It all fits and blends together at some point. But to get into that transplanted Rose Bowl game, the Beavers had to win the Civil War in Eugene and did, 12-7. So that's become my favorite Beaver Civil War win in Eugene, even though it was a few years before my time. What about you? You played in some, and what's your favorite Civil War win?
My favorite has to be back in '04, my first year. I was actually redshirt, so I didn't even play in it. But just my first experience in that game and the excitement behind it and seeing all the fans and how everybody got so jacked up for the game. And we came out at our place and just took it to the Ducks. Bill Swank had a huge game. I think he even had an interception as a defensive end. And I'll always remember this scene of him running off the field, coming off, jumping up onto the bench and flexing. The student section just goes wild. That's something that I will never forget at Oregon State.
And he had a reception in that game on a fake field goal.
He did. He did everything that game.
Yeah, Colt Charles, Bill Swancutt. Beautiful moments. I'm feeling better now than I did earlier. Just thinking about some of these great games. Tommy Prothro, Colt Charles, Bill Swancutt, Alexis Cerna, Derek Doggett. Let's keep talking. How about you, Angie? Your favorite Civil War game?
Well, 2000 was right up there, but for me, it was 1998. And I know a lot of Beaver Nation probably has that one too, but that was the first game I had to buy a ticket for. I graduated in 97, but back in the day, you could use your ID card. I used my ID card for 2 years, and I could just walk over the berm, go watch a game, but I needed a ticket for that game.
Statute of limitations has run out. I'm trying to prosecute her, by the way. But anyway.
So I'm golden now, but that game, just I think for what it meant for the program, where Oregon was, they weren't at that elite level yet, but they'd gone to the Rose Bowl.
And they were ranked 15th in the country.
15th for Ken Simonton and Jonathan Smith and just the atmosphere. And I remember they thought it was a touchdown. The crowd started storming the field. I mean, even grown adults were storming, and then they had to call everybody back and go back to. But Ken Simonton turned the corner in that double overtime. Seriously, the best moment. To me, it ranks above the Fiesta Bowl even, as far as just best win in program history.
It was a great game. To me, there's no better Civil War game that I've seen. When I put the 1941 Civil War win in Eugene as my favorite, it's only out of the fruits of research and a sense of honor of the history of the great rivalry. But in terms of a game itself, with drama back and forth, there's nothing to me like the 98 game, and that was an incredible moment.
2000 was pretty exciting, though, too.
2000 was okay. I mean, how about that? You're making me feel good. How about Jake Cookus now? We're invoking a lot of names. Robert Prescott, 2 slants from Jonathan Smith. The names.
I know, the names.
This has been a healing kind of show for Beaver Nation. Now you just got to go out and find a way to win Civil War number 117, make everybody feel good at the end of the week. The Beavers will try to create some new memories for us to talk about in future shows, but coming up next, Angie with a recruiting update. This is not, by any stretch of the imagination, the only show where we're talking Beavers or Civil War football in the 117th edition. Hashtag Beavers football, Wednesday night, coming up with our distinguished panelist, Slade Norris. That'll be at 10:30 on Wednesday. Then we'll have, as always, Game Day Live, except this time because Game Day is Friday. That will take place at 2 o'clock. And then post-game live Friday night at 7:30. And Slade, if I may go, Robert Walker, Farley, Granger, a little crisscross, Strangers on a Train, Hitchcock, 1952, I think. But a little crisscross going on in the shows this week. Tell us what you got going on.
It will. I'm going to go down and spend a few segments on the hashtag Ducks football so I can't pick some fights.
Okay.
And Josh Wilcox is going to come up and join us on our show. Just for the Civil War rivalry, we're going to get some Beavers and Ducks in the same show and see what happens.
I'm glad to hear it. And of course, the 2 Northwest kids, Josh out of Junction City, and you of course, the pride of Vancouver, Camas, Jesuit High School.
That'll be fun.
You know the Civil War, so that should be a lot of fun. Angie, speaking of fun, I know that not a lot of it was had. We belabored the point Saturday night, but there's still some good news going on the recruiting trail. Can you bring us up to date on that?
Yeah, Oregon State, right before I left for Corvallis, actually, on Saturday, there was a commitment. A young man, a cornerback out of Bakersfield, California, by the name of Kevin Hayes. 6'3", 170. He's lanky and long. I actually saw him when I went down and covered a camp down at Cerritos, California. Like I said, coaches liked him enough to offer him right after that camp. So no other offers. He's not ranked right now in Rivals, so his film will be evaluated by us. But he's one to watch. I mean, I think he fits in the Beaver system. He's not maybe a burner, but he's got those long, rangy arms. He can defend passes, and I think he might be a really good pickup for the Beavers.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And to get more, beaverblitz.com, the best place to go.
Beaverblitz.com.
Thanks, Angie. Now, in terms of not necessarily having a high rating on rival Slade, what did that mean to you when you end up coming out and playing NFL football? You weren't on those lists either, were you?
I think I might have been a 2-star, or I mean something down there.
I think you might have been a 3, low 3 maybe.
Oh, well thank
Maybe.
you. But I mean, coming through at Oregon State, we know coming into the program, it's a lunch pail program, and so, I mean, throw all those stars out. We're going to come out and we're going to prove to the nation we are better than everybody else, and we're going to beat you because you didn't choose us. So just trusting Riley and trusting the whole system. Get excited about these recruits, even though they might not be the top-ranked class in the world. We're still going to come out and dominate on the field.
Well, thank you for that, Slade. And you certainly, I mean, you ended up walking on here and then walking out of Oregon State into the National Football League. So we appreciate the experiences you've had. I do want to ask you one thing about the Beavers and their chances. We're going to get into it in a little bit more detail. But you were part of Civil Wars. You've already referenced 04 as a redshirt. 05 didn't go quite so well. But wins in 6 and 7. The thrill of victory certainly resonates. What do you remember about those 2 years in particular?
Being able to go beat them at home and then beat them again at their place and break the streak. I think it was the last 10 years or something that the home team had won that game. Being able to take the trophy back to Oregon State, it was huge, because these two programs, they battle so hard, and they've really come out of the dark ages from how it used to be, where these games are meaningless. Well, now, I mean, basically every year there's a Rose Bowl, there's some kind of BCS Bowl that's in the mix. It's an exciting time for both Oregon and Oregon State.
I think that's something that a lot of Duck fans, kind of the newer fans that are in with the Ducks right now, they forget that it wasn't that long ago that Oregon State and Oregon, neither one was solid. And they talked, I mean, I remember the talk back in the late 80s, early 90s of Washington State, and Oregon should be out of the Pac-10 altogether, because they weren't competitive.
Those sorts of history lessons, and we've talked a little history tonight, and even going back to the transplanted Rose Bowl, it would probably behoove fans of both programs to kind of take a look back at some of the history of the Civil War and appreciate how good these days are and where the programs are. But even in the days, if they were slugging it out for 1 or 2 win seasons, there was always something extra and special about the Civil War, and there will be this Friday as well. When we continue, we'll talk about the one thing the Beavers can do to start a new streak of the right kind. That's coming up on Talkin Beavers. The Pac-12 North standings reveal a very interesting final week coming up in the regular season, in that you've got Washington and Washington State each now at 4-4 heading into the Apple Cup. The Beavers have a chance at a 5-4 season, 7-5. Oregon could fall as far as 6-3 when it was talking about playing for the national championship a couple of weeks ago. Stanford winning the North and will play at Arizona State if Arizona State can beat Arizona and sew up the conference championship game. This league, Slade, Angie, it's a crazy conference year. So let's start before we even get to the Civil War and the one thing the Beavers have to do. The Apple Cup, another great Northwest rivalry. This one in Seattle, a few weeks ago, it looked like a done deal, and that Washington would roll over them. It doesn't look that way so much now.
It doesn't look that way now. And then just looking at how that will play out with the standings. I mean, everybody's kind of beat everybody. Washington State beats USC. It's just a crazy, crazy year. But Oregon State could finish as high as 3rd in the North, or as low as 5th. It's so much in the balance there of what could happen.
And Slade, I can't understand. From one week to the next, Washington State went to Tucson, beat Arizona, and Arizona comes back a week later with one of the best games that I think any team's played all year in pounding Oregon by 26. I mean, what do you make of all that?
I want to say that it's how much Washington State has improved throughout this season. They are finally kind of getting into Mike Leach's offense there and hitting their stride, and I'm really excited to see this next week. Washington State's air attack versus UW's ground and pound, So it's going to be a really fun game, and I don't know who's going to win.
No. How about the Territorial Cup? I mean, with what Arizona just did, they have to think they can beat anybody, anywhere, anytime. But can they beat Arizona State?
Both teams are coming in, I mean, kind of hot right now. Arizona State has the great season so far. Arizona has the great win over Oregon. You never know with these rivalry games. That's the fun part, is just roll the dice, flip a coin, because that's all you can get. Anything can happen.
In a year that has defied predictability, we come now one more time to the one thing the Beavers must do to win. And I realize, again, when we talk about a few weeks ago, I don't think a whole lot of hope would have been given to the Beavers' chances of breaking through down in Eugene this year. Then some hope was renewed when Oregon lost to Arizona, but then some of that hope was deflated when the Beavers played later that night. But I agree with Slade, Angie. Anything can happen, as Bruce Coburn would sing, and it can happen in the Civil War. What's the one thing the Beavers have to do?
Well, they have to, come out fired up. But the one thing I want to see from the Beavers is takeaways. They've got to, get an interception, get a fumble recovery, because that helps take the clock out of the play, because Oregon can score so fast.
Score on defense. Derek Doggett.
There you go.
We invoked the great name of Derek Doggett again. So get takeaways. Give the offense some better field position. The field position's been a tough deal lately. Slade, what's the one thing, in your opinion, the Beavers have to do to win?
I'm going to say a couple of things here. I'm sorry, but
that's okay.
The tight end play has to be great. Our defensive tackles, they've got to go in there and cause some havoc, take up those double teams, and give our linebackers time and room to run over and make those solo tackles.
Look at Slade's ready to bust the line
I can do it right now. And then make a big play right at the beginning. We have to swing the momentum and quiet the stadium so we can focus on what we're doing and get that crowd out of the picture.
Well, whether Byron Marshall plays or not, I know Thomas Tyner put the ball on the ground at Arizona. The Beavers hope to be able to score on defense, take the ball away, create better field position. But for me, the one thing the Beavers have to do, and it's been touched on a little bit, the Beavers are not Arizona. They don't have a Kadeem Carey type running back. They're not going to be able to run their offense that way in a week and reinvent themselves. But earlier in the year, they were going on long, sustained drives, and they're going to have to find a way to get back to a bit more balance, not only in run-pass, but in the way they're passing and distributing the ball. So the ability to control the football, keep Oregon's offense off the field, kind of settle things down, give the defense a chance to make some big plays. Beaver offense needs to return to those long, controlled drives. That's the one thing they need to do to break through in the Civil War Friday in Eugene. Slade, great job as a pinch hitter. Angie, thank you. We'll be back to talk about what should be another memorable Civil War.